Who is the most underrated actor of all time?
It's Dolph Lundgren.
Correct. Why?
Well, because of his spiky hair and
Yep.
his ice-cold demeanor and his big muscles.
Absolutely.
I must break you. The guilty will be punished.
My name is Sergeant Andrew Scott.
Come on, guys, don't do this. If I don't get breakfast, I get real grumpy. I don't think you like me grumpy. And you go in pieces, asshole.
Let's kick some ass.
Hello and welcome back to I Must Break This Podcast, the fan podcast celebrating the cinematic career of action legend Dolph Lundgren. Today, we're taking a look at Dolph's most recently released effort, Wanted Man. In this tribute to the films of Clint Eastwood, Dolph takes on acting, directing, and writing duties once again, in which he plays Travis Johansson, a troubled police officer who, in order to save face during a PR scandal, is sent into Mexico to retrieve a couple female witnesses. Yet when it's made clear that there are some who don't want to see these witnesses testify, Johansson must reevaluate both his morals and his friends to ensure that justice is served.
You have to save yours and our reputation. The DEA murders in Silverado. Remember that?
Yeah, 2 undercover agents killed in a drug buy.
We're DEA!
I got the marshals to agree to send you down and bring those 2 witnesses back here.
Sometimes I mess around with movie lines. You looking at me?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody else around here? ¿Algún problema?
We had a doctor fix you up the right way. This is my brother.
It's dangerous. The longer we're here, the more danger for your family.
Johansson has a few lives left. He's a strong one.
She can help solve who killed those DEA agents. In America, we can protect...
You can! Te van a encontrar, Rosa. Te van a matar, vas a que te maten nomás.
I saw what happened that night, and they know it.
So who do you know that you trust that you can call?
So many questions, my friend.
If you want to fight with the wolves, you gotta be a wolf.
I'm your host, Sean, and joining me once again is action movie scholar Vern, author of the books Sagology, Worm on a Hook, and Nike Town. His writings can also be found on his signature website, outlawvern.com. Vern, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming back on, man.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, well, I guess before we start breaking down the film, I have to ask, because, we were talking how long it's been since the last time I had you on. What is new? I mean, the website is being updated. I wouldn't even say weekly. It's just about daily. What's going on with you?
Yeah, I usually do 4 reviews a week, so it's a lot of work. But the usual, same stuff.
Same stuff, different days, right? Well, I should probably let you know, as well as the listeners know. I figured that you were most likely going to be covering this one. I mean, let's be honest. You cover a lot of the DTV kind of independent action stuff. You made a comment when we discussed Section 8, I believe, that you said something along the lines of, I don't want to mince your words, but I think you said something along the lines of, yeah, I seem to always get asked for the films where Dolph takes on a small supporting role. And so I remember you said that. And I said, well, you know what? He has this film coming out, Wanted Man, where he's not only the lead, but he is also taken on directing duties once again. He also wrote the film as well, like we said. So I figured, you know what? Vern has been in the trenches of the Dolph Lundgren supporting roles numerous times. I'm going to have him on for this one. So that's basically why I handpicked you for Wanted Man.
Thank you. I wasn't trying to guilt you into that, but I appreciate it.
Well, I mean, and you can never go wrong. I don't know if you feel this way or not, because I know that you've seen all of these films as well. But I honestly feel you can never go wrong with Dolph Lundgren behind the wheel directing. Okay, I mean, you know, when he's in front of the camera, I mean, look, he has a presence. He's amazing. But I feel like when he is behind the camera, he puts forth some of his, in my opinion at least, some of his best work. Because when he's behind the camera, even though it is of a low budget, he has kind of existed within that independent DTV realm for most of his career, let's be perfectly honest. So when he's given the reins to direct, I mean, I'd like to think he has a clear vision. He kind of knows how to cut corners. He knows what to do. And with that being said, I mean, I started kind of going back and I started counting. This is his 8th film. Well, I guess we can say 9th, maybe unofficial if you want to count Diamond Dogs, but I know he's not the credited director on this one. But this is his 8th real feature film that he is credited for as far as the director goes. So, I mean, I think that right there kind of adds some credibility and merit to the film. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and he's co-writer. You can tell that it's more meaningful to him than some of his other movies. It's definitely something that he believes in, and there are some pretty personal touches to it, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean that's an excellent segue. I wanted to ask you real quick. Were you familiar with this film when it was in production, or better yet, are you aware at all of the background on this particular film's production? Because, this film has had a long road to where it, we finally got to see it released. But were you aware about any of the background to this film?
Not really. I read that it had been in development since 2006, I think. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. This film, I mean, I had the pleasure of speaking with the co-writer of this film, Michael Wirth. And I've actually gotten to speak with him a couple times for the show. Anybody who remembers the days of PM Entertainment knows Michael Wirth. I mean, Michael Wirth has also kind of existed in that independent action genre, if you want to call it that. But yeah, I mean, I'll just kind of give you some of the Cliff Notes version of the background of this particular film. But yeah, basically Dolph Lundgren and Michael Wirth were, I think they met around the time of Bridge of Dragons. So we're looking at about 1998. They kind of got to talking, became friendly. And then, at around 2005, 2006, they started kicking around the idea for this particular film. And I mean, you can see, I mean, one of the cool things about this film is, I mean, this is a real passion project, and you get that. I mean, you just said it earlier, but I mean, you can tell that this was a real passion project for Dolph. When I spoke with Michael Wirth, you can tell that this was something that he was heavily invested in. I mean, and so, man, these two guys have been writing this film and working on it for just shy of 15 years, which is pretty amazing. I mean, the fact that not only was it made, but that we're talking about it now is, I mean, let's just face it. I think that is extremely amazing.
Yeah. And it's a movie that's partly about immigration. And then Dolph became an American citizen just a couple of weeks ago, like very close to when it came out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's very clear as well. I mean, Dolph has gone on the record talking about this in various interviews, but it's kind of interesting how, you and I who grew up on these particular films, we of course have our heroes that we look up to. With Dolph, I mean, it's very clear. I mean, he's like I said, has said this in numerous interviews. Clint Eastwood is one of his big his idols or his inspirations. And so if you look at this film, I mean, it's very clear that, in my opinion at least, that Dolph was inspired. This particular film, I honestly think it's the perfect amalgam of The Gauntlet and Gran Torino. I think if you were going to take those two particular films and just put them together, I mean, that's one of the best ways to describe this film.
Yeah, that's funny because I'm writing my review of it. I haven't posted it yet, but I didn't think of The Gauntlet, but I mentioned Gran Torino in my review, and also I mentioned Dirty Harry for the Dirty Harry series, I guess for a reason we can get into when we talk about the plot more. But yeah, that's interesting that you noticed that too. I didn't really think of if it was an intentional. Do you think has he talked about it being his homage to Clint, or?
Well, he didn't specifically say that it was his homage to Gran Torino, but he has mentioned that on numerous interviews, and I was actually going to play some snippets from some of those interviews, throughout this conversation. But he did mention very clearly that it was inspired by The Gauntlet. Michael Wirth, when I spoke with him a couple times, he admitted that as well. Gran Torino, that's just one that I'm kind of insinuating, but I mean, yeah, like Clint Eastwood. I mean, even my dad will freely admit that Clint Eastwood is one of his heroes as well. I think all those men of a certain generation. I mean, Clint was like the ultimate epitome of machismo. You know what I mean? So I think, in my opinion, again, I think it only makes sense that when Dolph is given free reign to write a passion project, and not only write it but also star in it and direct it. I'd like to think, yeah, he's going to be pulling inspiration and kind of doing something that is inspired by some of his favorite films. And I think that's what all artists and all auteurs do, is they take what they're inspired by and what they like, and they use that as kind of a blueprint or a template and put their own spin on it, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I love it because I love Clint Eastwood movies too, and it's it doesn't feel like one of those ones where someone's like trying to imitate the way that Clint talks and stuff like that, but just the idea of the grumpy kind of backwards guy that learns a little bit through a connection with another human.
Yeah. Well, and I guess, I mean, in one of the interviews that I saw, Dolph actually modeled the character that he plays, Johansson, on his own dad. So I think, really? Yeah. So I think it's clear that he's pulling from a personal place with this particular film.
So what's the mental state that you had to get into to write this role, to become Mike?
The character reminds me of my dad a little bit. My dad was kind of a bitter guy who felt down on his luck and took it out on people around him. And I think part of the inspiration also was people that I've met in Los Angeles who are from Mexico and the hardships they go through to make it over here. And I think that was part of the story too. We decided to make it a little more of a story about immigration and trying to make the main character have more of an arc.
Supposedly, I mean, you can only imagine, with the fact that both Dolph and Michael Wirth had been working on this film for almost 15 years. I mean, this film, I guess, supposedly just has like over a dozen drafts. Okay. I guess at one point, this is one thing that's kind of interesting. At one point, they were actually toying with the idea of having the witness that Dolph is going to team up with, right? The one that he's supposed to retrieve. They were toying with the idea of having the witness in Mexico be transgender. And that was one of the drafts that they were really strongly trying to push. But obviously that didn't happen. And I mean, it's kind of interesting. I mean, I don't want to fully get to my recommend all the way at the point, but I guess, considering I have been kind of following this film's production for the past few years, and after getting to speak with Michael Wirth and everything, at the end of the day, I don't know if you felt this way or not, Vern, but I think at the end of the day, that was like my biggest complaint with this film. And I don't have many complaints with this film, but I think my biggest complaint was just how at the end of the day, it was kind of generic and routine. And and there's nothing really wrong with that, but I guess considering it had gone through so many script revisions and everything, I kind of sat back when it was over and I thought to myself, like, they spent almost 15 years on this? Like, it didn't seem like anything new. If they had kept the transgender element in there, then I can see, that's something kind of new. But in the end, I don't think it could escape its overall routine plotting and feel.
Yeah, I guess since I didn't know that whole history, I didn't put that kind of pressure on it, so I didn't really feel disappointed. And I know you're saying that you did like it, but I didn't feel that any expectations of it being more than what it was, I guess.
Well, I guess before we break down the plot and get into all that, I'm curious, in your opinion, for you, where does it stack up against Dolph's other directing efforts? Because so if we just run down the list real quick of all the films that he not only had a hand in directing, but also starred in, we have The Defender, which I will go down swinging as saying I think that's, in my opinion, one of Dolph's best movies. But then he followed up The Defender. He did The Russian Specialist, or The Mechanic, however you want to refer to it. He did Missionary Man, Icarus, Command Performance, Diamond Dogs, which he's uncredited on, but supposedly he had a hand in that, Castle Falls, and then this one. I mean, and so for a guy who has been acting since 1985, for him to, at this age that he's in, still be, not only in front of the camera, but behind the camera, is pretty amazing. And I don't think there's any one of those films. I mean, some of those films, I'll admit, I like better than others, but I don't think any of those films are terrible. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. But I think I actually liked this I think this is one of the better ones to me. Yeah.
I'm curious, did you like it as much or better than The Russian Specialist? Because I think Russian Specialist and The Defender, if we're going to look at all of his directing efforts, those are the two that are at the top for me. And I don't know if this one quite matched those, but I'd be curious where you stand on that.
I think I would have to rewatch those because I remember them being things I thought were pretty good, but I don't really have much.
Okay.
I guess it didn't stick with me.
Well, if we go into the film and we start, breaking it down, I mean, it's, like I said, and I feel bad kind of, talking about how ultimately generic and routine it is. I mean, and I don't think there's really anything wrong with that. But I mean, the film is fairly straightforward. I don't want to say paint by numbers, but you do know kind of where it's going and the beats that it's going to hit. If we just go right to the opening, I mean, the great thing about this film, I will say, is that it is a clean 90 minutes. It does not overstay its welcome. I was listening to a podcast where they were talking about how films nowadays, they don't know how to pace themselves. They're either way too long and bloated or they're way too short. I mean, the great thing about Dolph when he is writing and directing and in the editing room, he knows how to tell a story and get in and out within 90 minutes. So we just look at the opening, the great thing that I appreciate about this is how it really doesn't skip too many beats. It opens with a bust in Mexico at an underground card game that is complete with undercover DEA agents, drugs, prostitutes, and basically the card game is busted by some masked thieves, and they kill everyone there, including the DEA, or excuse me, the undercover, I should say, DEA agents.
Who is yelling? He's trying to tell them, "It's me, it's me." So it kind of gives you the tip off of who those guys might be at the beginning.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things about this film that I was going to get to is, I mean, and again, when I talk about how somewhat routine it is, I mean, you can pretty much tell immediately as soon as they walk on screen who Dolph's allies are and who the enemies are, right? Like who the good cops are and who the bad cops are.
Yeah. Well, there's one exception, I think. To me, I thought because the chief was so nice that I was convinced that he had to be evil, but he actually wasn't. But otherwise, I agree with you.
Well, interestingly, I don't know if you knew this or not, but in that opening scene, one of the prostitutes who is killed is actually played by Dolph's wife in real life.
Wow.
I don't know if you picked up on that.
I did not realize that. Wow.
Yeah. So he's given his wife the plum rolls there, as you can see. And so, I mean, yeah, like I said, it really, I mean, for a 90-minute film, we have that opening scene, and then it just goes right into where we are introduced to Dolph's character. And I did kind of like this, the opening touch in which we are introduced to his character. We're introduced to the Johansson character by his supposed morning routine, where he is working out and then running on the beach. Conveniently, the scenes where he's running on the beach is with a stunt double. I don't know if you picked up on that or not, but I noticed
the hoodie was up.
Yeah, the hoodie was up. And he heads into work for what we see is, he's involved in a major PR scandal. We find out that I think it goes without saying he's a bit of a racist, right? And video footage was leaked of him beating up a Hispanic suspect, basically, right?
Mm-hmm. And he's being protested for it. I liked the touch that I didn't pick up on when they were talking about it on TV that it was talking about him. And then he drives into work and there's protesters there, and then he sees them and he like does a U-turn and drives away. They're like, "Hey, it's him." And they're coming after him. That was kind of funny.
The video footage, I will say, is like pretty hardcore. I mean, it's one thing that, I mean, we have, in this day and age, we have body cams and all sorts of footage of, with people on their cell phones and everything of police officers using their using unnecessary force. But man, if we look at this video, Dolph is he's taken the door of the police car and just slamming it on this poor guy's head. And it's like, wow, like it's going to take us a bit for us to get on the side of this on this guy, isn't it?
Yeah, I think one of my complaints about the movie, I was a little worried at this point because I like the idea of setting him up as this piece of shit at the beginning, but I have never seen a police brutality video where the other police try to stop the guy from doing it. It's just like, I just cannot believe that this would actually happen, Like, it doesn't fit with what we've seen in this world, They're trying to make a timely story, but they're doing it in a way that just doesn't ring true to me, I think, in the way they do the press conference about it and everything. But it quickly won me over after that.
Well, that's an excellent segue, because the thing that didn't ring true to me was the entire narrative impetus for the conflict at hand. I mean, I would like to think that if something like this happened, and let's be honest, things like this do happen in our society, he would immediately be put on administrative leave, right? I mean, he would not, I mean, he might be doing a press conference, but that was one thing that I had trouble believing. I mean, so if we just go to the next beat of the film, Johansson's superior, Hernandez, orders Johansson to go down to Mexico and retrieve a couple Hispanic women who were witnesses to the deaths of those DEA agents. And he's kind of doing this to kind of save face during that PR scandal, to kind of, make Dolph Johansson character appear like a nice guy once again. But I mean, I'm thinking to myself, like, no way would they take that kind of chance. They would find some other officers to go down and do it, but no way would they put the one who's under investigation and doing a press conference. They would send him on this mission, right?
Right. At least it was accurate in that he wouldn't be held accountable, but yeah, I agree. That's not believable, but I can see what they're trying to do.
I mean, the one thing about this film too that is really kind of cool. I mean, and look, Dolph did something very similar with Castle Falls. I mean, I will say, if we're going to compare this particular film to Castle Falls, I didn't get what the exact budget was on this film compared to Castle Falls, but this one actually, in my opinion, looks much better than Castle Falls did. Castle Falls, really, I mean, that film was shot during a pandemic and everything like that. So that film in the end kind of had a bit of a kind of a cheap look to it. This film has a much more cinematic, polished look to it, which, I mean, let's be honest, I think the pandemic is really to blame for that one. But what's great about both films is, and again, I got to put this all on Dolph's shoulders here, but he makes it more of a character film. Okay, he makes these films more about the characters, really more than the action. I mean, the action in both Castle Falls and this film, especially Wanted Man, I would say is secondary. Okay, the great thing about this is Dolph, he really, really takes his time in letting the characters and their conversations breathe, maybe even more so than the action.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's another thing that's kind of Clint-like about it, is that he really, we're kind of used to the action heroes who kind of deny that they're getting older in their movies and try to pretend they're not. And I like that it addresses right up front that it's talking about how he needs ankle surgery, and you see him taking a bunch of pills after his jog at the beginning. And then he spends a lot of the movie wounded and handcuffed to a bed and stuff like that, and it's just like not pretending that he's still the He-Man, you know.
Well, it's a good point. You know, I felt there was a relief to play a character like that, not to have to pretend, you know, that I can actually sometimes play my age and play, you know, injuries and things I have, you know, that, you know, they come with age. And if you live this life, whether it's law enforcement or movies, action movies, that's going to happen, you know. So I'm trying to do that now in all my work. I'm trying to be a little more true to life, you know.
I mean, and that's something, I mean, yeah, that's something that Clint Eastwood has always done and made a conscious effort of within his films, is while he is still acting and starring in films and directing those films, the great thing about Clint Eastwood is his characters are always aging with him as well. I mean, I distinctly remember seeing...
Well, except for the last one, the Cry Macho.
Oh, except for that one, yeah.
But yes,
yeah,
I agree.
Right.
That's one thing I love about him.
Yeah, now that you mention that, yeah. But I remember, I mean, it's funny you mention that, but I remember back in 2000, I want to say it was, 2001, Bloodwork coming out, okay? Yeah. And I remember seeing that one, and one of the I mean, it's an okay movie. It's not fantastic or anything. It's certainly not one of Clint Eastwood's best movies, but what was really cool about it, and I remember all of the reviews seemingly pointing this out, is that it was a film where Clint Eastwood was finally acknowledging that he was an old man and he was playing an old man. You know what I mean? And so, I mean, that's one thing you got to give Dolph credit for, is that he is allowing himself to be vulnerable. I mean, like you said, yeah, he's mentioning that he needs his ankle, which again, that's kind of one of the things I had a slight issue with. And it's like, well, why do we show him running on the beach in the morning and he's running just fine? You know?
He was limping around though. I don't know about the jogging, but I noticed that he was limping, and then he mentioned it. So
yeah. I believe he shot and filmed this film right before he went in for his ankle surgery he had. I don't know if you follow him on socials or anything like that, but he did have a major ankle surgery during this film. And then he also came out within the past year saying that he battled cancer. So I believe he was going through cancer treatment as well, kind of on the tail end of that as he was filming this particular movie. So I think when you hear all of those things, it kind of just makes the final product all the more remarkable, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
But going to how we said that this is more of a character piece, more of a character-driven film, I mean, that's one thing that I really noticed, is that there are a few scenes where Dolph really, like we said, really lets the characters breathe. I was going to play it here in a minute, but there is a fantastic scene between Dolph and the witness. We should probably say that the witness in the film, there's actually two witnesses. Spoiler, one of them is shot in one of the... Immediately, yeah. But the one who he does team up with, the character's name is Rosa Barranco. She's played by Christina Villa. I don't know where they found her, but I think she does a phenomenal job in this particular film. But they have a really cool scene where they're holed up in this hotel room, and they're both kind of, you know, acknowledging the fact that they are both flawed human beings, but that they're both ultimately good.
Well, I actually wanted to talk about a little before that the character De La Cruz that he meets when he first gets to Mexico.
Yes, man, Go ahead.
Yeah, because he comes to Mexico and he meets this young, handsome cop that's the one who has to bring him to the witnesses and everything. And so this was an example of somewhere where the movie kind of swerved on me in a way I didn't expect, because I see this guy and I'm not familiar with this actor, but he was immediately really charismatic and like has a funny chemistry with Dolph. And I was like, oh, okay, so this is going to be like, this is where the Dirty Harry comes in, that I thought it was going to be like, oh, he's got this young partner who's from Mexico and he kind of shows him a different dimension that gets through his racist brain, you know? And so the scenes with him, he's really funny and cool, and it's kind of like Dolph looks really cool in his light colored suit that he's wearing, but this guy is kind of intimidating to him. He's got like sunglasses and he's talking about how he wants to be an actor. And then ironically, they just shoot him right in the face when he dies. But
Yeah.
that's I was totally on board for like, oh, this is going to be a buddy movie with this guy, and then the guy immediately gets killed along with one of the witnesses. And then there's a great moment there where they're driving with the two witnesses in the back of the car, and they're really upset because they know that they're in danger from being transported, and they're arguing with De La Cruz in Spanish, and one of them says something that makes him laugh, and then Johansson, Dolph's character, looks like very left out because he doesn't know what they're talking about, and he hears them laughing, and like I thought that was a really great touch.
Detective Sergeant, Gran Ballena. Come meet our witnesses. Leticia Gomez and Señorita Rosa Barranco. Someone tried to kill her last week.
¿Nos van a entregar con este güero? ¿Que no lo ves? ¿Que no entiendes? Mira.
What the hell is this one yelling about?
She says we might as well kill her now and be done with it.
Okay, I'll think about it. Let's get back stateside first.
Into the car.
Mira, si nos encuentran muertos va a ser tu culpa. ¡Me las vas a pagar, pendejo!
Yeah, that particular character, I mean, after speaking with Michael Wirth, I have some theories about that. It's funny you brought up that character. But yeah, I agree. I had never seen that actor before, but man, is he charismatic when he pops on screen. Okay, and he's quoting movie lines and everything. He's quoting movie lines that, I mean, anybody who's ever seen a movie before knows those.
I forget what else yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, but he's doing a wonderful job. I mean, I remember Michael Wirth telling me that one of the drafts for one of the scripts that they had was that they considered it kind of being like maybe a buddy cop movie. And so I would be willing to bet, Vern, I don't know I can't speak to this if it's in fact true, but I'd be willing to bet that character was brought over from the draft, the one of the drafts that was intended to be the buddy cop kind of thing, like we were talking about, because that's the thing too, that, I mean, I think is in the end pretty amazing and remarkable about this particular film is, I mean, let's be perfectly honest, for these independent DTV action films, you know what I mean? You really just don't get a side quirky character like that. You know what I mean? You would get the character, you'd get the De La Cruz character who Dolph has to team up with to transport these cows, and then he's blasted in the face, and then the film moves to the next action sequence. But for him to be given those just kind of quirky little character nuances, you just don't get that in these type of films. And so
and especially for them to find an actor that actually is good enough to make a strong impression like that with that little scene.
Yeah, so I'd be willing to bet that he had a bigger role in one of the drafts. But I mean, going back to the hotel room scene, I mean, again, you just don't get those kind of films. I mean, I hate lumping this film together with any of the Bruce Willis films that Bruce Willis did with EFO, because I mean, I feel like all of those films were all done on an assembly line. They were pretty much a factory, and things have come out to where maybe there was some other nefarious things going on. But I mean, those are independent action films as well. But I mean, you don't get, first of all, you don't get characters like this that are that quirky. And you certainly don't get, scenes that really just kind of slow down. You know what I mean? I mean, that's the thing about this film is, I mean, the few action sequences, that it has, I mean, they're brutal. I mean, they are really bloody and really gory. And for the film to, have those moments, and then it just really, really slows down. It lets everything breathe. Dolph's character gets to kind of start to kind of have his transitional arc. Same thing with the Rosa character. And then it moves on to the next hardcore action sequence. But let's face it, in this age of, disposable streaming content, we just don't get those, these types of beats and these types of scenes and these types of films. You know what I mean?
You miss your home?
Do I miss my home? Yeah, I guess.
My best friend, she grew up watching her mother and her grandmother go from nothing to nowhere. She's living a life of struggle and pain. But she knew a place where everyone had a chance. America. She paid a Coyote group to get us across. And she had a cousin in Los Angeles who would raise me and put me through school. But she never set foot on American soil. She died 100 yards away from her dream for me. With 2 fat, slobbering Coyote scumbags breathing down her face. And I got away before they could do the same to me. So at 16, I lived on the streets, undocumented. And you learn some things there. Some things you shouldn't have to learn.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it okay that it's a pretty obvious plot, because it's not really about that.
Yeah. I mean, one thing too that I picked up on that I really, really liked too, and again, I gotta believe this is all Dolph as well, but those scenes where Johansson and Dela Cruz are in the transport vehicle transporting the witnesses, what's really kind of cool, I'm sure you picked up on it, but I personally loved it. This film was shot in New Mexico, we should probably say. Okay. And there are, but before things go down and before the Dela Cruz character is shot and Johansson is left for dead and everything like that, we get some really cool exterior shots of Johansson in this convoy vehicle. And the camera, if you notice, the camera really, really steps back, okay? And he films this vehicle traveling alone on the road, from far away. I mean, and it's really kind of cool because, I mean, as a viewer, that this is all the calm before the storm, that they are going to be, that they're going to be ambushed. But what's really cool is, I mean, he doesn't just use one shot, but there are like multiple scenes that are on the exterior where you just see this car alone on the road. And that was something else that I thought was a really cool touch.
Yeah, I agree. It's well shot. It's got a nice look to it. The locations are, it's believable that it's Mexico.
I will say the problem, okay, the problem, and there aren't many, okay, but I said something pretty similar with Castle Falls. I honestly feel like with a film of this nature, there's a bit of a trade-off, okay, because again, it's working with a low budget. It only has so many days to shoot, right? And so, Dolph kind of has to, he has to say to himself, okay, well, if I don't have time for this, what can I put more time and effort into? And so, and again, I made this same comment, the same complaint with Castle Falls. It's not a huge deal, but one of the things that does, in my opinion, hurt this film is because Dolph has decided to make this more of a character piece and to focus more on the relationship between Johansson and Rosa. As a result, the villain really gets shortchanged. And I feel like if this film, if it had more of a budget, if it had more shooting days, then yeah, we would have gotten that, you know what I mean? That real, penultimate villain, right? Who chews up the scenery and everything like that. Unfortunately, there really isn't really much of a villain. I mean, that's in my opinion, one of the other problems with this film is that, yeah, there is zero surprises in this film whatsoever. Okay. Kelsey Grammer shows up as Dolph's former mentor named Brenner. Michael Pare shows up as a fellow officer named Tonelli. As soon as they come on screen, you immediately know that they're crooked. No surprises whatsoever there. And I honestly feel like, especially with the character, the Tonelli character that Michael Pare plays, I feel like maybe what the script should have done is maybe have Michael Pare play his villain card early. You know what I mean? Play that hand early in the film to where we know that he is bad and we see him really tune up the scenery, really being evil and on the chase, in pursuit, I should say, of the Johansson character. But unfortunately, they don't do any of that. And when it is revealed that they're the villain, it's no surprise whatsoever.
Well, I agree with that mostly, but I really liked them as the villains because I did immediately. I think there's something very observant about the way that they portray them as depicting this particular type of like old boy network of cops that all like the fact that they get away with what they're doing is because they're former cops. And there's actually this scene that I think is really great. That's where Kelsey Grammer goes into the police station to kind of get more information about what's going on in Mexico. And, you know, I obviously thought he was going to be the villain, but they're trying to make you think maybe these guys really are. There's a big thing about how they miss the action of being cops and everything and being heroes or whatever. And they want to help, you know, if you're not guessing that they're the bad guys, then what this would be leading to is they're going to like have their own vigilante mission to go rescue them, and they're going to recapture their former glory. You know, I think that's what you're supposed to think. And they hint at it enough that I was thinking like, oh, I hope that's not what it is. because I really liked the idea of like, he comes in wearing they all dress like they're on vacation all the time. He's wearing like a Hawaiian shirt and sunglasses and hat, and he like comes into the police station and he's going around and he's like pointing and going, oh, you lost weight. Oh, how's you? You know, he's like best friends with everybody in there. And it's like he's allowed to go in there and get information because he used to work there and they're all his friend. And they don't suspect that he's the one that killed the DEA agent and did all this stuff because because he's their buddy. And so they do a really good job of depicting this whole world where they all talk to each other in this buddy way. They go to the strip club together, and they try to talk him out of going to Mexico. They say a bunch of racist stuff, and they talk about being old and how the strippers are young enough to be their daughters and all this stuff. And they're like, I don't know. I thought it was a perfect depiction of that type of dude, and the type of dude that Johansson could become, and then because of the events of this movie, he hopefully will not become one of those guys.
Well, I immediately knew that there was going to be no character arc or redeeming qualities with Michael Pare right from the get-go, mainly because
he did look like a bad guy. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because he's wearing a gold chain necklace. I mean, as soon as you see him pop up and he's wearing that necklace, I was like, okay, well, he's going to be one of the bad dudes. I mean, yeah.
In fact, he looks so evil that when he first walked in, I didn't understand that he was one of his friends too. I thought this is now like a gangster guy that's coming in to intimidate them or something. It took me a bit to catch up.
And that's what I think. I mean, I feel like, since that's not much of a surprise, in my opinion, what I wish the script would have done is, make that reveal early in the film to where, he's looking at his dirty cop, henchman or whatever. And he's saying, that we can't let Johansson come back, right? Let's get them. And suddenly then it becomes a chase, because what's really interesting, if you think about it, Vern, all of the action beats in this film, and again, I love all the action beats. I think the scene on the road where Dela Cruz is blasted, that turned out really cool. The shootout in the hotel, or where they're back at Rosa's place, and Dolph has the shotgun. You know what I mean? I think
the kitchen.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, all those scenes are really cool. But if you really think about it, all of the action sequences are a result of Dolph telling Rosa, "Oh no, we can trust these guys. Let them in." And
but that's what I like about it, though. It's like she's telling him, like, "No, you can't." She knows better, but he's stuck in this old way of like, "These are my buddies. I trust them."
Yeah. And I mean,
like that.
And see, and I guess I liked it the first time, but then the second time, as soon as they get in the car with Kelsey Grammer, I'm thinking like, okay, well, we know where this is going. You know what I mean?
But I think there's a lot of tension in that, though, that you're like, okay, these guys are definitely bad guys, and the fact that he doesn't pick up on it, but she's obviously going like, oh, this is weird. Why did these guys show up here and stuff? But he's not picking up on it. I think there's like that whole scene in the car. I thought it was effective because we knew that these guys are going to turn on him.
Another really cool thing about this film that, again, quibbles aside, that I think we can say is one of the things I really appreciated about this film as well is the fact that you get multiple sets. You know what I mean? Like that's something else that we really don't see a heck of a lot in these independent films. I mean, if you really think about it, this film really goes to multiple locations, okay, for not just its action sequences, but for, simple scenes of dialogue. I mean, if you really break it down, we have the scenes on the road, we have the scene in the hotel room, we have the scene back at Rosa's brother's place, we have the scene at the courthouse, then back at the police station, then at the strip club, even though the strip club looks like clearly it was some kind of makeshift set that they threw together last minute. But that's something else that, I keep saying this, and I promise I won't continue sounding like a broken record here. But again, you just don't get multiple sets, multiple locations these days. Okay, nowadays, I think the idea is, okay, we have one, maybe two sets. Well, you know what? Let's make it a siege thriller. Or let's make it a Die Hard knockoff or something of that nature. The fact that Dolph is really maximizing the budget, the shooting time, the number of days, the natural lighting too, the daylight that they're working with in this film, I think is all to ultimately to the film's strength and credit. Yeah, I agree. I think we haven't really talked about that after they get ambushed by crooked Mexican cops, Rosa has an opportunity to escape, but she decides instead to save him. So she brings him to is it her mom's house? She brings him to a family home, and she keeps him handcuffed to a bed, but she gets the bullet removed, and then she has a brother who's a cop, who she trusts because he's her brother. And so they kind of keep him prisoner, but then there's this whole thing where he kind of briefly strikes a friendship with her mom, which I liked that part of the movie, that she brings him food, and when he tastes it, he's like, stops being grumpy for a second, and he says, gracias. Yeah. And then, but a thing that I really liked about it also is that, I don't know if you read it this way, but I got the impression that the room he was locked up in was her bedroom from when she was younger. And there's like all these soccer trophies, and there's like a poster of a soccer player and a soccer ball and stuff. And it looks like not in a cheesy way. Like it looks like a real, like, lived in home. And it just gives this idea that she's supposed to be this person who came to America illegally and got into trouble and became a prostitute. And then she's like on the run after witnessing this massacre. So I like that it gives this dimension to her by showing, like, this is her life before that, and you can see this whole history to her in that bedroom. Yeah. I mean, I already said it, but I'll echo it again. I think Christina Villa, okay, as this Rosa character, I think she is fantastic. I think Dolph did perfect casting there with her. I mean, if we go to the end real quick, I wanted to get your opinion, your take on the very end. I guess you can interpret it a couple of different ways, but if we go to the end real quick at the courthouse, okay, she's all, I mean, if you noticed, she's like completely dolled up and almost looks like a completely different person by the end of the film. But we see that Dolph's character has transformed. Okay, he is much more open-minded and not as bigoted as he was at the beginning of the film. What's interesting is he asks her, do you want to go out for a cup of coffee? And she says, sure. And they leave. Now, I am glad that this film did not end with them embracing or them, it fully leaning into them starting a relationship. But it does kind of hint that they might, go off and there might be some romance there. I guess before I give you my take on it, what were your thoughts on the end and where we can assume these two characters go? I read it the same. I think it's a little corny, but it's. I guess I was just relieved that it wasn't more than that, because I think they established like a sexual tension between them earlier in the movie, like in that scene when they're in the hotel. And he's sleeping on the couch and he's like looking over her, and I was like, oh no.
and then it doesn't go anywhere. And so I think they were just having. It's definitely implied that maybe she has a crush on him or something at the end, but at least we don't have to go there. Really, they just maybe they're just friends at the end.
And see, I mean, I think look, it's not a make or break for me, to be perfectly honest. But I mean, that's one thing too that I was kind of like, it doesn't have to be a romance. And again, I'm glad that they kind of leave it up for viewer interpretation. But one idea that I had, I don't know where you stand on this or not, because I mean, let's be honest, Vern, the actress Christina Villa is significantly younger than Mr. Lundgren, right? Mm-hmm. And so the idea that I had was, okay, what if, earlier in the film we find out that Dolph had a daughter who was unfortunately killed by a drunk driver who just so happened to be a illegal immigrant, or just so happened to be Hispanic, or whatever it may be. Then what that can do is that kind of gives us a reason for Dolph's bigotry, for his character's bigotry. And then with the dynamic between the Johansson character and the Rosa character, well, then suddenly we get like a father-daughter relationship. And I almost would have liked it better, I think, if it had gone that way, to where he's able to kind of be a father figure once again, you know what I mean? And this character is kind of serving that purpose. Maybe I'm going way further into it than really need be, Vern. But that's kind of where I wished the film had zigged when it zagged, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I could see that working, but then again, like, a lot of people are bigoted without having to have an origin story for it. So
true.
It makes sense that he's just a jerk and, an ignorant person.
Yeah.
But yeah, I see what you're saying. I think she's definitely younger than him, but she's also, it's not like she's, I have no idea how old she is, but she seems very mature and
she has a maturity.
Yeah. And has a very strong screen presence that doesn't seem like some like young model or something like you might see in a lesser Steven Seagal movie or something where they have that issue with the old guy and the young.
Oh boy. Yeah. I can't remember if it was one of your reviews or not. I don't think it was, but I remember there was, for one of those many Seagal movies that came out in that mid 2000s period, it's showing him getting romantic with a gal who is old enough to be his daughter, a very a very young daughter, and they equate him as he's embracing her and kind of leaning on her. They equate it with him looking like a vampire. You know what I mean? And so it's one of those things that just doesn't work. Well, okay. I mean, I know we've kind of bounced around this film back and forth, but I mean, like I said, it is short. It is extremely straightforward, but I mean, it does its job in 90 minutes. Is there anything else that you'd like to say about this movie? Before we get to the recommend, are there any scenes or any moments that you'd like to point out that maybe we didn't discuss?
Yeah, I just want to mention I liked that the shootout in Rosa's house was good. I think there's the issue with some of the action in it is that as much as he's trying to work in that he's old, there's definitely some suspension of disbelief required in some of that he's always the one that hits the other guys and they don't hit him in the shootouts, because he's just kind of like getting very lucky that nobody ever hits him, I guess. But the shootout at Rosa's house was really cool because of how he's handcuffed to the bed, and this cousin Salvador, I think was his name, who's kind of like very briefly established, but he's like a likable minor character. He gets shot and Johansson is handcuffed, but he reaches over and picks up his shotgun, and then he uses Salvador's body to aim he hoists the gun onto him and aims over it, and then there's this whole thing where he's shooting out the door at this guy that's hiding behind a fence, and he shoots through the fence and you see the guy drop through. It's like a really well staged shootout, and then he uncuffs himself he gets the keys and uncuffs himself, and then I mentioned he gets the knife, and just like there's this part where he comes up behind this guy and is stabbing him, and he looks really like savage, and and he's like, I don't know, it was a really cool scene. He's like stabbing him, and then he's looking in the window, and he's like, "Are you okay?" Like checking on Rosa's mom.
Yeah, I mean, I go into my recommend, here in a minute. I mean, I will say, yeah, I mean, you can tell that Dolph, while at times I will say the action does feel a little shoehorned in, at times compared to the character work that Dolph is offering. I mean, you can tell that both Dolph and Michael Worth really thought long and hard about how, okay, if this film is only going to have 3 real action sequences, well, then let's choreograph it right. You know what I mean? Let's figure out some kind of creative, inventive ways where we can do this, where it is not just, someone hiding behind a bed or hiding underneath a table and, kind of peeking out and popping off a few shots here and there. I mean, like you said, I thought the, him getting him handcuffed to the bed and trying to, work with that while also, trying to survive, I thought was really kind of cool. But at the end of the day, Vern, I mean, again, I had a lot of fun talking about this film with you. I mean, I know, like we said, we kind of jumped around it, but here we go. Okay, here we are. The past couple times it was Dolph in these small supporting roles where he kind of let other younger actors do the heavy lifting and everything. Here, okay, you've been given a Dolph Lundgren film where he is not just front and center in the film, but he's also, I mean, this is his movie where he is directing everything. He is writing all of the action. So here you go. I hope you enjoyed it. But at the end of the day, would you recommend this film, not just as a Dolph Lundgren film, but as a film in general? Where do you stand?
Yeah, I think for fans of modern independent action movies, I think it's a good one. It's it doesn't, you can't expect it to be on the level of his movies from the 90s and everything, but as far as the modern DTV or VOD action movies, I think it's a good one because it's well made. He's got a good character. The cast is really good. Like I agree with you about what's Christina Villa, is that her name? Who plays Rosa? Yeah, I agree. She was excellent, and her whole, they managed to make me care about her whole family in this section of the movie at her house, and then Kelsey Grammer, I think, in a small amount of screen time is just perfect for playing that particular type of jerk. And it's interesting because he's kind of what I interpreted as the message that they're getting with his character. I feel like is not, I don't know. I don't know much about him. I know that he's conservative, so I don't really know how far it is. But I found it interesting that he would do that role and do a good job of it, kind of portraying a point of view that I think is the bad guy's point of view that maybe he agrees with somewhat in real life. But I don't know. So I feel like it's like for someone like me who enjoys this type of template and this type of movie, it's got enough of the character and emotion and kind of nuance on top of it that makes it enjoyable for me.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. I mean, I'm with you right there to an extent. I mean, I will say, as a big fan of Dolph Lundgren, I mean, I think it's always cool to see Dolph straddle both a genre that he's comfortable in with a type of role that he has never really been able to do prior. Okay. Looking at this particular film, I mean, yeah, for being of the independent DTV world, I think it is very well made. It has a fantastic sheen and veneer to it that you really just don't see in these type of independent action films. While I guess, kind of like I said earlier, considering, when I heard that Michael Worth had so many drafts of the script and that they had been working on it for so long, I guess I was kind of hoping for something that felt a little bit different than what we ultimately got. But I don't think that's a detriment to it. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, it may not be anything highly original, but I will say, this film is never boring. Okay, it does its job within 90 minutes, and it manages to continue reminding us that Dolph is a force, both in front of and behind the camera. At the moment, as of this recording, Dolph really doesn't have much on the horizon that he's going to be filming. I was going to get your take on these films and and where his career is going to go. But if, okay, this is a big if, but if this just so happens to be one of the last lead starring roles that we see from Mr. Dolph Lundgren, I think it is a wonderful send-off to a fantastic career.
Yeah, I agree. It's good to end on something that's like thoughtful and has some, is about empathy and stuff,
Yeah.
And learning, kind of evolving, I guess would be the word.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wanted to get your take real quick, though. I mean, I'm sure you've been seeing the action genre, especially of the independent variety. I mean, man, it's really interesting to see where we're going to be going over the course of the next couple years. But I have some theories myself. I kind of wonder if we're really going to be seeing any more independent action films, especially of this nature, considering that, I mean, let's be honest, there's really not a heck of a lot of money being pumped into these films. And when they are put out, it's kind of like, how does a film like this get eyes on it? I mean, that's kind of my big wondering that I thought I'd get your opinion and your take on real quick. I mean, but this film was, like we said, this was a passion project. There was a lot of sweat. There was a lot of effort that went into it. And unfortunately, it was just kind of put on the various streaming services with not a heck of a lot of fanfare, with not a heck of a lot of marketing. I mean, Dolph, God bless him, he was trying, doing some various interviews, getting it out there. But I mean, it is very difficult for a film of this nature to get out there and get eyes on it. I mean, back when he did The Russian Specialist and Command Performance, I mean, we still had a rental market. We still had the Blockbusters and the Hollywood Videos where you could put this on a shelf and it would get traction. But now with so much streaming content that is out there, unfortunately, a film like this that I did highly enjoy really just gets lost in the shuffle. I mean, would you agree?
Yeah, and it's disheartening for us as viewers to see how much they're forced to make the budgets and schedules smaller and smaller. Like, it's very obvious that they're, there's so many movies where it's like, well, we got Mickey Rourke for one day, so he's going to be in this part where he cries, and which we talked about that with Section 8. Like, it's just unfortunate because if you look at Scott Adkins, I feel like Scott Adkins is doing an amazing job. He's still making like great movies, and he's way more famous than he used to be. But if you look at like the Undisputed sequels, seem like gigantic budgets compared to what he's able to do now. And they were shooting on film at one point, and it's just I don't know, maybe it's a result of everything in this world being taken over by stock market scams, and everything is about maximizing profits and not doing a good job anymore. But yeah, so it's I worry about it too. On the other hand, there has been able to be like the John Wick movies and some of those other kind of more medium budget movies occasionally we're able to get. And so, I don't know, hopefully there's still a future for it. Maybe there's less of a future for these tiny ones, but I don't know.
Ultimately, I mean, what I'd like to see, I mean, in an ideal world, I mean, when I ask that question, how does a film like this get eyes on it? What I would love to see, okay, in my ideal world is, I mean, look, I'm not a huge fan of Kevin Smith. Okay, I think he's a bit of a loudmouth and everything like that. But what's interesting about Kevin Smith is he saw the writing on the wall years ago. Okay, and so what he decided to do with these films, especially if they were extremely independent, was he was able to tour these films himself. You know what I mean? He was able to take these films on the road and go state to state, and put them in the theater for one night only, and then afterwards offer a Q&A. And I honestly feel like Dolph, I mean, look, obviously I'm a little biased considering the nature of the show, but I feel like this particular movie, considering, this was his passion project, this is a film that I think would have been amazing if he had done something similar to that. Scott Adkins is another one. I mean, Scott Adkins has done a few films that he's extremely proud of. I mean, the Accident Man films, for example. And I think, look.
I feel like Michael J. Sorry to interrupt. I feel like Michael J. White is the guy to do that.
Maybe Michael J. White too, you know what I mean? But if they have a film where they're not just a supporting character, but where they're, in the film and they're running the show, then I think that would certainly get more eyes on it if they, again, took it on the road, went to various cities. Here where I'm at, we have Alamo Drafthouse. That's a big theater chain that does things like that. But I think that would certainly help get eyes on a small little film like this. But unfortunately, Wanted Man is at the moment the only free streaming service that it's on is on Hoopla. But let's be perfectly honest. It's going to be on Tubi and on the other free services within about 2 months, I imagine. You know what I mean? And it's just going to get lumped with all of the other stuff that's out there. And as a result, is not going to be able to, have the legs to stand up and stand apart from, let's be honest, all of the other junk that is on there, unfortunately,
Yeah, I'm glad I don't have to figure it out. The economics of movies now is so, I don't know. Yeah, I'm a broken record on that, but it's just like there used to be video stores and Dolph Lundgren would make a movie and Blockbuster would buy such and X number of copies, and so he could do whatever he wanted. And Jean-Claude Van, it was a good time for that. Jean-Claude Van Damme, his name is on the cover, we will buy this number, so therefore go make the movie. And he was able to have like a reasonable budget for it and everything. And a lot of them were like either good movies or just interestingly bizarre movies. I missed that. I don't know how you make that work in streaming, but I hope they are able to get paid from Tubi and things like that. But.
Yeah, well, I'm not counting it out just yet. I think we might be able to see Scott Adkins and Michael J. White take one of their new films on tour and do a sweet Q&A afterwards, with the audience or whatever. Because I think there is certainly a market for that is at this point, I think, fairly untapped, that I think would be really cool to see. So
yeah, I think you're right. I think that would work.
But Vern, it's always a pleasure getting to talk with you. I'm sorry that it's been over a year since I last had you on. But before I let you go, anything that you want to give a shout out to, or anything that you want to mention? It's really cool having you on because you are a published author who has multiple books out there. Your website is constantly getting traction. What's new? What's going on, man?
Not much. I'd like to write another book, but I haven't. I have to percolate for a long time on this. I've got one that I'm kind of working on, but it's a ways off. But I'm always writing reviews on outlawvern.com. And so, yeah, check me out on there. And I'm on Twitter and the usual suspects under at outlawvern on everything.
Excellent.
So you can get the links to my reviews on there.
Well, thank you again for joining me. I'm glad that you enjoyed the film, and let's be in touch. We'll have to chat again, okay, man?
Yeah, thanks a lot. It was great.
To everyone out there who is listening, please feel free to rate and review the show on iTunes or wherever else you go to subscribe. We always appreciate the reviews. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you all next time on I Must Break This Podcast.